Just like muscles grow through deliberate progressive overload, your cognitive abilities expand when you apply structured, intentional training to your mind. Steel trap thinking is not a natural gift. It is a product of sustained effort, practice, and neural conditioning. The human brain is remarkably plastic, meaning it can change its structure and function in response to how it's used. If you train your focus, you get better at focusing. If you regularly push yourself to concentrate deeply on complex problems, you rewire the brain to become more resistant to distraction and more comfortable with mental strain. The process begins with what neuroscientists call neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt based on repeated patterns of thought and behavior. If you feed your brain novelty and challenge, it becomes stronger, but if you allow it to drift in a constant loop of mindless scrolling, comfort-seeking, and reactive thinking, it weakens. Steel trap thinking is cognitive fortification. It requires habits such as daily, deliberate, focused sessions where you work on something difficult without interruption, gradually increasing the duration and complexity over time. It involves engaging in practices like mindfulness meditation, not for relaxation, but to enhance your ability to notice distraction and bring your attention back on command. Over time, these habits condition the anterior cingulate cortex and dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, regions of the brain that regulate attention, conflict resolution, and goal-directed behavior. The result is a mind that can lock on to what matters and hold that focus, even in the face of competing stimuli. This kind of mental endurance doesn't just make you more productive, it transforms your identity. You begin to identify as someone who finishes what they start, someone who doesn't quit when it gets uncomfortable, someone whose attention is an asset, not a liability. To forge this kind of mind, you must also train outside of comfort zones. Controlled exposure to mentally fatiguing tasks, high-pressure environments, and time constraints help build cognitive toughness. This is the same principle used in elite military and athletic training. Expose the system to stress in a calculated way so it adapts and grows stronger. If you want a mind that intimidates mediocrity, then you need to stop approaching mental training as optional and start treating it like your most essential priority. Because in a world full of overstimulated, under-disciplined minds, the person who trains their cognitive function with precision becomes a weapon. Steel trap thinking isn't just about being smart. It's about being unbreakable under pressure, clear under chaos, and immovable in your mission. Mediocrity survives in ambiguity. It exists where there is no clarity, where thoughts are fuzzy, decisions are delayed, and intentions are diluted. Steel trap thinking eliminates that fog by demanding precision of thought, which is not just a philosophical concept, but a biological advantage. The brain, especially the prefrontal cortex, is designed for high-order processing, planning, decision-making, problem-solving. When you train your mind to operate with precision, you're activating and strengthening these higher-level neural circuits, reducing interference from emotional centers like the amygdala that can hijack attention with fear, stress, or impulsivity. The result is a mind that sees clearly, acts decisively, and adapts quickly. This level of precision comes from practices that improve working memory and attention span, such as eliminating multitasking, using focused time blocks for deep work, and employing metacognitive strategies like asking yourself, what am I really trying to solve? Or is this the most direct path to my outcome? Steel trap thinkers don't think in vague terms. They use exact language, set measurable goals, and define success clearly. This tight alignment between thought and action makes them exceptionally efficient and highly resistant to distraction. Precision also means knowing when to say no. The steel trap mind is not wide open to every idea, every demand, or every distraction. It selectively engages, focusing only on what aligns with its goals and discarding the rest. This cognitive filtration reduces neural noise and preserves mental energy, allowing for deeper, higher quality thinking. It's a kind of mental minimalism where clarity and intensity replace clutter and confusion. Moreover, precision creates psychological confidence. When you can articulate your thoughts clearly and move with intent, your self-trust increases. You no longer second-guess yourself because your mind is used to structured analysis and purposeful execution. This clarity begins to impact everything, your relationships, your work, your ability to navigate stress, because you've trained your brain not just to react, but to respond with accuracy. In environments where most people are overwhelmed by complexity or frozen by uncertainty, the steel trap thinker moves forward with a clear, strategic edge. They don't hesitate because their neural systems have been conditioned for clarity and action. Precision is power. It isn't cold or robotic, it's intelligent and adaptive. It recognizes patterns quickly and filters noise effectively. And it's built through routines, through reflection, through disciplined thought. If you want to intimidate mediocrity, you can't just think harder. You have to think sharper. A mind trained for precision becomes a force of nature, deliberate, decisive, and dangerous to anything average. What you allow into your mind determines how your brain functions. It's that simple. Steel trap thinking starts with recognizing that the quality of your cognitive output is directly tied to the quality of your inputs. Every article you read, every video you watch, every conversation you entertain, it all contributes to the architecture of your mental framework. The brain is a prediction machine. It builds models based on the information it receives, and it uses those models to guide decisions, emotions, and behaviors. If you feed it noise, randomness, and cheap stimulation, you'll build mental habits of distraction, impulsivity, and emotional reactivity. But if you feed it structured knowledge, deep insight, and challenging ideas, it evolves to become more analytical, more focused, and more adaptive. Steel trap thinkers are intentional curators. They protect their attention like it's a limited resource, because it is. They choose content that sharpens them. They limit passive consumption. They design their environments to support deep work and clarity, removing the triggers that invite distraction, like constant notifications, open-ended scrolling, and multitasking traps. These thinkers understand that every time they check their phone in the middle of a task, they fragment their focus, increase switching costs, and weaken the neural pathways that support sustained concentration. Commanding your outcomes starts with controlling your inputs, because the brain doesn't work well under clutter. Cognitive overload leads to decision fatigue, and decision fatigue leads to poor choices. Steel trap thinking is about creating cognitive efficiency through selective exposure and deliberate focus. This isn't about being closed-minded, it's about being directionally minded. The steel trap mind isn't distracted by every trending headline or every new opinion. It seeks depth, not noise. It reads for insight, not entertainment. It listens to learn, not just to pass time. It builds knowledge trees where each new concept branches off from a core structure, reinforcing memory and accelerating learning. That's how lasting intelligence is built, through context, not just content. Furthermore, controlling your inputs includes how you manage your internal dialogue. The stories you tell yourself, the questions you ask, the beliefs you reinforce, these are inputs too. And they shape not just your mood, but your brain chemistry. Positive, focused inner language can elevate dopamine levels, increase motivation, and prime your mind for execution. Negative, vague self-talk can trigger cortisol, increase anxiety, and shrink your perception of possibility. The steel trap thinker engineers both their external and internal environments to support their mental evolution. They don't leave their mind open to garbage. They treat it like a laboratory where only the highest quality ideas are allowed in. And over time, this selective process compounds, creating a mind that filters noise, rejects mediocrity, and executes with clarity. That's how you forge a brain that not only thinks clearly, but thinks like a weapon. What you allow into your mind determines how your brain functions. It's that simple. Steel trap thinking starts with recognizing that the quality of your cognitive output is directly tied to the quality of your inputs. Every article you read, every video you watch, every conversation you entertain, it all contributes to the architecture of your mental framework. The brain is a prediction machine. It builds models based on the information it receives, and it uses those models to guide decisions, emotions, and behaviors. If you feed it noise, randomness, and cheap stimulation, you'll build mental habits of distraction, impulsivity, and emotional reactivity. But if you feed it structured knowledge, deep insight, and challenging ideas, it evolves to become more analytical, more focused, and more adaptive. Steel trap thinkers are intentional curators. They protect their attention like it's a limited resource, because it is. They choose content that sharpens them. They limit passive consumption. They design their environments to support deep work and clarity, removing the triggers that invite distraction like constant notifications, open-ended scrolling, and multitasking traps. These thinkers understand that every time they check their phone in the middle of a task, they fragment their focus, increase switching costs, and weaken the neural pathways that support sustained concentration. Commanding your outcomes starts with controlling your inputs, because the brain doesn't work well under clutter. Cognitive overload leads to decision fatigue, and decision fatigue leads to poor choices. Steel trap thinking is about creating cognitive efficiency through selective exposure and deliberate focus. This isn't about being closed-minded, it's about being directionally minded. The steel trap mind isn't distracted by every trending headline or every new opinion. It seeks depth, not noise. It reads for insight, not entertainment. It listens to learn, not just to pass time. It builds knowledge trees where each new concept branches off from a core structure, reinforcing memory and accelerating learning. That's how lasting intelligence is built, through context, not just content. Furthermore, controlling your inputs includes how you manage your internal dialogue. The stories you tell yourself, the questions you ask, the beliefs you reinforce, these are inputs too, and they shape not just your mood, but your brain chemistry. Positive, focused inner language can elevate dopamine levels, increase motivation, and prime your mind for execution. Negative, vague self-talk can trigger cortisol, increase anxiety, and shrink your perception of possibility. The steel trap thinker engineers both their external and internal environments to support their mental evolution. They don't leave their mind open to garbage. They treat it like a laboratory where only the highest quality ideas are allowed in. And over time, this selective process compounds, creating a mind that filters noise, rejects mediocrity, and executes with clarity. That's how you forge a brain that not only thinks clearly, but thinks like a weapon. Steel trap thinking is not about avoiding discomfort. It's about learning to thrive in it. The most powerful minds are not those that dodge challenge, but those that seek it out, confront it head on, and use it to their advantage. Mental strength is forged through adversity. Just like muscle fibers that tear and rebuild stronger after intense physical exercise, your brain builds resilience by continuously exposing itself to mental strain. When you push beyond your comfort zone, your brain's neuroplasticity accelerates, creating new connections and strengthening existing ones. Stress is not an enemy to the steel trap thinker. It's a tool for growth. Controlled exposure to discomfort, whether through intellectual challenges, time constraints, or high-pressure situations, helps your brain become accustomed to maintaining focus and clarity under stress. In essence, the more you stretch your cognitive abilities, the more robust your neural pathways become. This is why steel trap thinkers deliberately seek out mentally demanding tasks. They choose difficult problems to solve, they work in environments that push them to concentrate for longer periods, and they embrace uncertainty because they understand that only through this mental struggle will they build the strength necessary to succeed in high-stakes situations. This process of controlled stress also builds emotional resilience. When you repeatedly confront and overcome mental challenges, you train your brain to stay calm and clear under pressure, and the emotional centers of the brain, such as the amygdala, are less likely to hijack your thoughts in moments of uncertainty or stress. Instead, you learn to engage the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for rational thought and decision-making. This is why people with steel trap minds can maintain composure during chaotic or high-pressure moments. They've conditioned their brains to stay grounded in logic and focus rather than reacting impulsively with anxiety or fear. To truly develop this kind of mental toughness, however, it's essential to step into discomfort intentionally. The steel trap mind doesn't wait for discomfort to come, it creates it. Whether it's through physical exertion, intellectual challenges, or emotional exposure, the steel trap thinker welcomes moments of mental stress as opportunities for development. They understand that avoiding discomfort only reinforces weaknesses. Additionally, mental endurance doesn't just come from intellectual exercise. It requires careful management of the body and mind. Cognitive strain must be balanced with rest and recovery, because even the most elite minds need time to reset. The steel trap thinker understands that effective performance is about sustainability. They don't simply grind endlessly. They build periods of rest into their routine, allowing their cognitive resources to replenish and their bodies to recover. They know that peak performance doesn't come from pushing nonstop, but from strategically pacing oneself, incorporating downtime, and making sure that energy is available when it's needed most. In a world where people are often tempted to believe that success comes from all-out, non-stop hustle, the steel trap thinker knows that longevity and sustained success come from mastering both the grind and the recovery. Ultimately, embracing discomfort is about creating a mindset that is resilient, adaptable, and unshakable. It's about developing the ability to persist and excel in the face of difficulty. When you expose yourself to discomfort, you train your mind to remain steady, sharp, and focused, regardless of external pressures. The key to overcoming mediocrity is not avoiding challenges, but actively seeking them. This is how you develop the emotional and cognitive resilience to become unshakable, to lead through adversity, and to crush every mental barrier in your path. The steel trap thinker not only survives in discomfort, they thrive in it, knowing it's the forge that makes them invincible. Mental discipline is not a burst of motivation. It is a deliberate architecture of structure, habits, and protocols designed to override the brain's natural tendency toward ease and distraction. Motivation is fleeting. It rises and falls with mood, external validation, and energy levels. But discipline, when cultivated properly, becomes the stable foundation upon which steel trap thinking is built. A steel trap mind does not wait to feel ready. It moves based on systemized routines that are neurologically designed to trigger action, sharpen focus, and conserve cognitive resources. One of the most effective ways to create mental discipline is through ritualized behavior, consistent routines that signal the brain it's time to lock in. These protocols could include morning focus sessions, where within 15 minutes of waking, you engage in deep work before the distractions of the day begin. This leverages the brain's heightened state of dopamine and cortisol upon waking to channel motivation into directed action. Over time, this morning ritual rewires the brain to associate that time with productivity and discipline, regardless of mood. Mental discipline is also enforced through dopamine management. The steel trap thinker is not addicted to cheap rewards, likes, views, or fast entertainment. Instead, they delay gratification intentionally. They understand that dopamine is not just about pleasure, but about drive. By restricting their access to immediate rewards, they raise the motivational value of meaningful goals. This neurochemical leverage gives them endurance where others burn out. They do not need external stimulation to get started. Their environment and routine are engineered to activate internal drive. Additionally, task chunking is a central tool in this mental system. Instead of overwhelming the brain with entire projects or complex goals, steel trap thinkers break tasks into micro units that can be executed consistently. Each completed chunk generates a small dopamine reward, reinforcing the habit of progress and making larger goals feel manageable. This doesn't just create momentum, it builds identity. You stop saying, "I want to be disciplined," and start saying, "This is who I am." Sleep optimization is another pillar of mental structure. The disciplined mind respects the biology of recovery because it understands the cost of poor cognitive function. Sleep is not seen as optional or indulgent. It is treated as cognitive maintenance. Proper sleep consolidates memory, restores neurotransmitter levels, and enhances prefrontal cortex performance, all critical for high-level thinking and decision-making. Nutrition and movement also support mental structure. A steel trap thinker does not fuel their brain with low-quality input. They consume foods that stabilize glucose, hydrate properly, and move daily to maintain blood flow to the brain. These aren't separate from mental discipline. They are a part of it. Another key factor is environmental control. The steel trap mind doesn't live in chaos. It operates in a curated, clean space that reduces mental clutter. By organizing the external world, the brain faces less friction in entering flow states. Every part of their surroundings is either aiding their focus or eliminated. There's no randomness, only systems. Lastly, steel trap discipline incorporates reflection. At the end of the day, a structured mind audits its performance. It evaluates what worked, what needs optimization, and what habits need reinforcing. This feedback loop transforms every day into data and every action into refinement. Over time, this builds a mind that operates with mechanical precision but human intention. It's not rigid, it's reliable. Not robotic, but consistent. The mind becomes a tool, not a trap. It obeys commands. It works even when motivation fails. That's what separates the mentally elite from the mentally average. Discipline, not desire. When the mind becomes governed by structure instead of sensation, mediocrity doesn't stand a chance. Cognitive endurance is the ultimate differentiator in a world flooded with short bursts of attention and instant gratification. Where most minds sprint and stall, the steel trap thinker paces with strategy, sustains pressure, and builds momentum over time. Outperforming others isn't always about intelligence or talent. It's often about staying mentally consistent long after others have burned out. Steel trap thinking thrives on long game focus. It's not about being brilliant for 5 minutes. It's about being relentless for 5 hours, 5 days, 5 years. Endurance is about how long you can maintain high-quality thinking without mental fatigue degrading your performance. This capability is built through deliberate training of your attention span, the regulation of neurochemicals like dopamine and acetylcholine, and the recovery protocols that ensure sustainability. When the brain is taught to stay engaged over extended periods, it becomes resistant to the kind of burnout and overwhelm that plagues average minds. This training could include extended focus sessions where you gradually increase your time under cognitive load, timed work blocks with active breaks, or constraint-based tasks where creativity must emerge under limits. The steel trap thinker doesn't fear mental fatigue. They understand it. They track their mental rhythms, structure their work around their peak cognitive windows, and recover strategically. They use tools like non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, breath work, and mindful walking to reset their nervous system between intense cognitive blocks. They're not working harder randomly, they're working smarter methodically. Endurance is also tied directly to how well you regulate your dopamine system. In a world saturated with instant rewards, the steel trap mind doesn't chase stimulation. It creates internal reward systems by focusing on progress, mastery, and long-term outcomes. Each small win in a high-concentration session releases just enough dopamine to keep going, while avoiding the crashes caused by excessive external stimulation. This balance keeps the mind fueled but not fried, driven but not drained. Additionally, endurance comes from emotional stability. Mental energy leaks through indecision, worry, and reaction. Steel trap thinkers are emotionally efficient. They don't let negativity spiral or stress dominate their thinking. They use reframing, breath regulation, and reflective journaling to stay in control. This means they can keep thinking clearly when others freeze. Their bandwidth stays intact in pressure situations, not because they're fearless, but because they've trained themselves to keep thinking despite fear. Endurance also relies on energy management. Nutrition, hydration, sleep, and movement aren't side considerations. They are non-negotiables. The steel trap thinker eats for clarity, moves for alertness, and sleeps to sharpen memory and recovery. The body fuels the mind, and without that connection, even the sharpest thinker will dull over time. They do not separate mental stamina from physical habits. Both are inextricably linked, and both are trained with discipline. Finally, what sets the endurance mindset apart is the way it views failure. While average minds see setbacks as signals to stop, steel trap minds interpret them as opportunities to refine their system. Failure is data, fatigue is a training signal, and struggle is a sharpening stone. This growth mindset transforms long-term pressure into long-term power. By embracing the cumulative nature of mental growth, where each day of sustained thinking builds on the last, the steel trap thinker compounds their cognitive gains far beyond what short bursts of effort could ever achieve. This is the mindset that doesn't just survive hard work, it dominates in it. Mediocrity may sprint, but excellence endures. And in the end, it's not the fastest start, but the strongest finish that defines true mental power.